Ready? Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. It is now 9:35 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting of the STP Project Selection Committee to order. Just a quick reminder for those in the room today, restrooms are straight back to the left of reception. If you haven't already, please make sure that you sign in on the sign-in sheet out in the hall. Any members of the public that would like to make comments later on the agenda should fill out a public comment card. Those are out at the sign-in table in the hall, and you can hand that to Terry Dixon or any of the other CMAP staff in the room. This meeting is also being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. In order for those online to hear what is being said in the room, it's critical, as always, that we all use our microphones and identify ourselves when making a motion or a second. For those of you that are participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you're called upon to speak. And when it's appropriate later in the agenda, I will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box. Staff monitoring Zoom will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. With that, let's start today with self-introductions of the members of the committee here at the table. I'm Cam Dobbs, chair of the committee representing CMAP, and to my right.
Heather Mullins with the Regional Transportation Authority.
Dan Burke with the Chicago Department of Transportation.
Grant Davis with CDOT.
Leon Rockingham, Mayor of North Chicago, Council of Mayors.
All right. We do have a quorum of voting members present. I also want to recognize that we have Chad Riddle from IDOT and Sis Killen representing the counties that are participating via Zoom as non-voting members. Let's go ahead and introduce the other folks in the room. Thank you, Terry.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kane Kendall, Council of Mayors.
Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors.
Brian Larson, Northwest Municipal Conference.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
In the back.
Megan Swanson, IDOT.
Sarah Stolpe, CMAP.
Doug Ferguson, CMAP.
Russell Petrovic, CMAP.
Henrietta Brown, CMAP.
John Hosma, CMAP.
Isauta Velez, CMAP.
All right, thank you. And Doug, do you want to do a rundown of who's signed in on Zoom, please?
Yes, we have Angela King Ramsey. See Brittany Mateus, Chad Riddle, Don Dina, Dustin Clark, Jackie Forbes, Sis Killen, Joe Surdom, sorry, 1 second. Mark Kane, Leslie Ronner, Matt Pasquani, Mike Clemens, Phoebe Downey, and Tara Orban.
All right, thank you and welcome to the meeting, everyone. Let's get started with our first item, which is agenda changes and announcements. Staff has no changes and no announcements at this time. Do any members of the committee wish to make any changes or announcements? All right, hearing none, let's move on to approval of our minutes. We have before us the draft minutes of August 31st, 2023. Are there any corrections or additions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So move.
Moved by Mayor Rockingham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Heather Mullins. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Next on the agenda, we'll review the active program management reports. Beginning with our shared fund active program report, I did realize late yesterday when prepping remarks for today that the status report in our packet was missing one of the new projects that we programmed in FFY 25. So there are updated copies at the table and the version of the agenda packet posted online was updated as well. This report does provide the current status of shared fund active projects, including those new projects that we added at our last meeting. These new projects won't submit their first status updates until December. So the target dates reflected on this report for those projects are from their funding applications that were completed last March. And I suspect that some of those targets have probably changed. You'll also recall that as part of the program approval, we awarded cost increases for 2 projects in federal fiscal year 2024, even though we were already fully programmed in 24. To do this, we're acknowledging that we plan to use a portion of the unobligated funds from both the shared fund and local programs that have been redistributed for regional use per our active program management policies. Also, per those policies, we will need to first obligate 100% of our mark for the year before we tap into the redistribution. So you'll now see a section on our status reports that designates the projects that are targeting obligations later in the year as the ones that will be planning to use the redistribution. In addition to those 2 projects planning to use redistribution later, staff did receive a request from McHenry County to reprogram their Randall Road project from the contingency program to the active program. The project is targeting the January 19th, 2024 letting and has so far met the necessary milestones for that letting. Therefore, per our active program management policies, staff did approve the request and has submitted a tip change for consideration by the Transportation Committee at their November 17th meeting. With the approval of the FY 24 to 28 new program, we also have a new contingency program. Staff is still in the process of sending out award letters and contacting sponsors to confirm that they want to remain on that contingency list. So once that process is completed in early December, we'll resume putting together a contingency program status report. So there's no status on contingency projects in our packet today. With that, are there any questions about the status of any of the shared fund projects? All right, seeing none. Next up is our current regional accounting update, which has been updated through October 11th. The first page of the report is the final accounting for federal fiscal year 2023. As a region, we obligated 174.8 million, 20 million of that from the shared fund and the rest from the local programs. As we've discussed previously, this is well short of our mark of 332 million. So we need to be more aggressive with our cost increases and moving projects in from contingency, which, as we saw on that last agenda item, we're doing with the shared fund already. And several of the councils have requested to plan to use some redistribution funding later in the year as well. As we turn to the next page of the report, we have the details for the current year of the program, which is fiscal year 2024. To help us track where we are as a region with the more aggressive programming, staff did add a row to the summary to reflect what the level of the planned use of redistribution is. Although all of the councils in CDOT are rolled into one in this report, we do track that use on an individual council level. What we're seeing so far for federal fiscal year 2024 is that we're planning to use about 58.5 million of the redistribution for shared fund projects and about 22 million for local projects, which is less than half of the available redistribution balance, but is definitely a good start. I'm sure that throughout the year, we'll see these numbers change. I know, the city had inquired about adding a project to their program, and several of the councils are also receiving requests to add projects into their programs as well. So finally, the bottom of the second page and then continuing on to the third page are the less detailed summaries for the projects that are in fiscal years 2025 through 2028. After local STP programs are approved this summer, then we'll be adding federal fiscal year 29 to the report as well. Are there any questions from the committee about the updated accounting? Seeing none, we can move on to the next item. So as we know, after we complete each program development cycle, staff in this committee kind of debrief and discuss what didn't work from the prior cycle or any adjustments or additions that we want to make to improve the methodology for the next cycle. Because of changes made to the active program management policies last spring, our schedule for these discussions is a little bit compressed, as we're targeting having our call for the federal fiscal year 2026 through 2030 projects begin next October instead of in January. So that way we're targeting MPO committee approval of the program in June of 2025, which is 4 months ahead of the start of the federal fiscal year, instead of getting approval after the federal fiscal year has already started. And I'll have more details on that schedule change. With the shorter schedule in mind, staff is looking for your feedback today on any methodology topics that anyone on the committee would like us to focus on or dig into more between now and our first meeting in 2024. So if you'll go to the next slide, John. There are three main parts of the methodology, as we know: the eligibility criteria, the project types that are funded, and the scoring criteria themselves. For eligibility, we have, the minimum total cost of 5 million or a partnership of 3 or more agencies. We require projects to come from a locally adopted plan, and we require preliminary engineering to at least be underway. The cost, partners, and inclusion and plans criteria have been pretty consistent throughout the years of the shared fund. Requirements for preliminary engineering, as we know, have changed a little bit every cycle. From staff's perspective, the changes that we made to preliminary engineering requirements for our just completed cycle made sense. There was much less gray area in our assessment of project status than in previous cycles, and we didn't need to lean so heavily on IDOT and FTA to confirm project status the way we did in previous cycles. So, staff's happy to present some stats on the PE status of applications in the spring, but we're not proposing exploring any changes to the engineering or other eligibility requirements for the next cycle. Also, the 9 project types here have evolved a bit over time, with bike ped barrier elimination added in 2021 and the transit yard or terminal improvements added to the transit station category in 2023. Staff does want to compile some stats on the applications received in each category over time to be sure that we're not hanging on to categories that folks just aren't interested in, or that may be better served by other funding programs. So we'll discuss those results in early spring. Are there any other thoughts from the committee on additions or subtractions or even tweaks to the project types, or anything else about the eligibility criteria? Anything we think we're missing or holding on to that we shouldn't be holding on to? No? I see heads shaking. Okay. So the next element of the methodology is, of course, the evaluation criteria. Up on the screen is kind of the simplified version of the scoring matrix. The transportation impact scoring, as we know, varies in detail by the project type. Those details haven't changed significantly over the last 2 cycles, except for that introduction of the methodology for rail yards and terminals, which we do want to take a look at. I think we committed to doing a postmortem on that when we added that category. Again, overall, staff is relatively comfortable with the majority of the criteria as they are now. We do still have some concern about the jobs and housing benefit causing some unintended elimination of projects in the less developed areas of the region. And we want to continue discussing whether that is an outcome that's acceptable to this committee. During the last cycle, the CMAQ program also made some adjustments in the equity scoring that we maybe want to take a look at using instead of or in addition to the jobs, housing, or the inclusive growth planning factor. Finally, we also introduced resilience as a criterion in the last cycle, and we want to take a look at the results of that this spring as well. Are there any other, criteria that the committee wants staff to kind of research in the next couple of months before we hash them out in the spring? If not, we'll focus on what I just mentioned, and then we can, we'll still step through everything in the spring just to confirm that we're all comfortable with everything as it is. But, we have 4 months where staff can be doing some digging. So if there's something that we might want to look at, now would be a great time to know that.
Those were the only ones that changed significantly, right?
Yep.
And I don't recall any other issues with any of the other categories that were noteworthy, so
Okay.
it makes sense just to focus on the new ones.
Okay. Sis or Jeff, I see are online. Anything to add?
I apologize. I just joined late, so I'm.
That's where I can't see the bottom of the screen. Mine stops at sub-regional priority. So is there anything else beneath that?
The last line is total possible points of 100.
Okay, no questions.
Okay. Once again, you're making this a really short meeting for me. Okay. I think next slide is that draft development schedule for the next program, which is the 26 to 30 program. What we're proposing is opening the call for projects in October. closing that cycle towards the end of November, beginning of December. We'll see how it plays out around Thanksgiving. Staff would do the analysis from December through February, probably release the draft for public comment in April, and again, look to that final MPO policy committee approval in June. I think we tentatively have a transportation committee meeting scheduled in May. We expect the transportation committee to approve their schedule at their next meeting. So that's really the same amount of spacing in all of the steps, just slid forward those 4 months. Again, with that, trying to get to the June MPO meeting instead of the October meeting. Next slide is tentative meeting dates for this committee. You know, as everyone knows, this committee's dates and the CMAC committee's dates get tied into the CMAC Transportation Committee for specifically for tip changes for CMAC and TAP projects. Once the Transportation Committee approves their meeting dates, then we can make these the official dates, but we're looking at meetings in February, April, excuse me, May, July, August, September, November, December. That would be our maximum amount of meetings, I would imagine, and I would suspect that we'll probably eliminate a couple throughout the year if they aren't needed. So I think we did a pretty good job of looking for holidays and spring breaks and Lollapalooza and things like that. But if anybody sees a date in the next couple of weeks that looks like a critical, you know, there's something going on, you know, that the mayors would all be involved in or something going on at CDOT that conflicts with any of these dates, please do just let us know and we can make adjustments. So, all right, with that, next up is other business. Does anyone have any other business for the good of the committee? None? Okay. We'll move on then to public comment. Staff did not receive any written public comment prior to today's meeting. And I don't see Terry jumping up with any in-person comment cards. Does anybody in the room want to make a comment that didn't fill out a card? Is there anyone online wishing to make a public comment? I see nothing in the chat, but if anybody wants to make a comment, please feel free to unmute and identify yourself. Going once, going twice. All right, let the record show that there was no public comment. So our next meeting is scheduled for November 30th. However, staff doesn't anticipate having any business for the committee's consideration. So we're suggesting that we cancel that November 30th meeting and have our next meeting be the February 15th, 2024 meeting.
Okay.
All right. With that, if there's nothing else for the good of the committee, thank you all for your work this year. Have a great holiday season, and we will see you in February pending a motion to adjourn. All right, moved by the mayor. Second by Heather. Any opposed? If not, all in favor, say aye and run for the door.
Great.
All right, thank you. This meeting is.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay warm, everybody. Have a good one.